technology and putting ideas together. And the idea of the Oculus, which was a major technological leap forward for virtual reality, started as a Kickstarter prototype back in 2012. So just the last Olympics, the London Olympics, was 2012. It doesn't seem that long ago, does it? And basically, they raised for their virtual reality headset product via donations $2.4 million, and that was from 9,500 supporters. That basically $300 a piece for promising game developers an early version of its developer kit. And again, for our topic today, gaming entertainment is going to be a big topic of our conversation today. And basically, there was no ownership interest, which is interesting, which is always a issue around crowdfunding, and that's something that's become more in the forefront as crowdfunding has matured, and people have seen its great promise, but also its limitations. Back in 2012, 2013, it was almost pure promise. And then what we saw was that you started to see very quickly that as venture capitalists do, there was this sense that this was a transformative technology, a big long-term bet. Another thing we're going to talk about, long-term bets today. And in June 2013, a number of VCs put in $16 million for approximately a third of the company, and you have some famous VCs here that are involved with that investment, including Peter Thiel and of PayPal fame, and Sean Parker, originally of Facebook fame, put money into the company. We then March 2014, and this was back then. This was Facebook. What are they doing? How are they running their business? And for the astounding sum of $2.3 billion, which in today's context seems like a tremendous bargain, but back then this was just basically for a tech, for something that in just a few years ago seemed to be a pipe dream. $2.3 billion, $400 million in cash, and $1.6 billion in Facebook stock for the company. And we fast forward that they had some incentives for the management team. We fast forward, and that $60 million investment. Now we don't know exactly if the investment positions are still held in Facebook. Facebook has obviously had a tremendous run. Stock has more than tripled in the last 18 months, and that position of $16 million is now worth approximately $3 billion. So let's do this, people, to make sure everybody basically. So basically, the point here is that this is an example of an entrepreneurial and investment opportunity. And it ties in very much into our topic today, that this was a bet made in 2012 that today, even though there still was pretty much just huge losses in terms of the amount of money that Facebook is putting into Oculus, there is a sense that this is a big opportunity. And we see here that now this is the cover of Business Week last month. Nerd goggles, the Oculus VR headset. Luckily, our very handsome and attractive panel here is not wearing the Oculus VR headsets for our talk today, but this is something that we're going to be seeing more and more. And this great little tagline: Mark Zuckerberg wants to put an Oculus on all 1.7 billion Facebook users, and that kind of flows right into our topic today. We're going to basically I'm going to start the recording here for folks now, and get right into this. So that how this works today, what our goals are, and then we're going to dig right into our all-star panel, which we're going to make sure we leave the majority of the time for some folks that have amazing insights to share from being deep in the industry about where the business is now and where it's heading. And then we're going to wrap with Q&A. So how this works, we're going to go 45 minutes today. As you have questions, please, I want this to be interactive, so we're manning the Q&A here in the GoToWebinar toolbar, so please ask questions as we grow. And thank you, Richard and Kamini, for already asking a few questions. We're going to work those into the conversation. As you have questions, enter them, and then as the moderator, I'm going to work them right in. So this is a participatory sport. Really encourage folks to engage in the conversation today, and the hope is we can come up with a few insights that we can use in our business for those both within the virtual reality space and whatsoever. So again, for those that are joining us, entrepreneurial and investment opportunities in virtual reality. I'm going to introduce our panel here in a second, and let's get right after it. So what are our goals? That I think goal one, we have a lot of folks from the industry that are on the webinar today. So we want to make sure that we're offering some industry-specific ideas and wisdoms that really are from folks that our panel are folks that are in the business as technologists, as entrepreneurs, as folks that are really a visionary and are doing some things in terms of thought leaders in the space. So we want to make sure that we're giving ideas, industry-specific ideas and wisdoms, both winners, losers, prognostications, hardware, software applications, and then I think really this is for me. I'm not a virtual reality. I'm a GrowThink. We're a firm. We advise companies on their strategic growth plans. We own a broker dealer, so we help companies raise capital and think about their financing and their exit strategies. So we have a number of virtual reality clients, but really for me, I find virtual reality it's a topic of very significant interest for mainstream business on a number of levels. Tyson Wost, as we were preparing for this, from Transported VR, one of our panelists talked about virtual reality, a feeling versus seeing. And I think there's a huge amount of application for this in modern marketing and sales, where so much of what we're doing is trying to break through the noise and get to an emotional connection with our prospects and our clients. And so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Is that as a marketing and sales application, how does virtual reality work? And then I think very importantly in company culture, that this is a great group here. We have none of us are sitting together. Udi and Leon are joining us from another country. They're joining us from Canada. Julie, Jared, and Tyson are here in Los Angeles, but we're all in different locations. And so this is a virtual reality experience. We're going to talk about this idea of virtuality and virtual reality. All of we have attendees from all over the world. So how does this work? What is virtual reality in terms of we're going to talk about themes about augmented reality and headset and those types of themes. So with that introduction, I want to kind of go right to our panel here, and for the sake of, we got their smiling faces up here on the screen. They're up on the webcam as well. I'm going to start with Julie Young from Emblematic Group, who has produced some really interesting room-scale virtual reality experiences, including for the Sundance Film Festival, has done work at the White House in this regard, at a policy session for homelessness at the White House. It's done some really interesting things, and I guess my opening question is for you, Julie, is that you're very immersed in the technology, the application. So what's going on? Why is the market growing rapidly right now? What is where do you give us an early prognostication here? Where do you think it'll go from here?
Oh wow, that's a big question. Yeah. So I think right now the three there's been a lot of excitement around VR ever since Facebook bought Oculus, really in 2014. And then since then, there's been continual excitement as different iterations of the hardware have come out. But it wasn't until this year that all three of kind of the major competitors in the hardware space, so Oculus, Sony, and HTC Vive, they all came out with their consumer versions this year. So I think we're getting to the point where people can buy headsets, they can access content, and now we come to the issue of is there enough content yet for VR? So I think that's kind of where we are right now.
Great. And that content question, let's kind of dive. Let me let Leon Ng from LNG Studios, that does work as kind of a creative 3D visualization agency specializing in virtual reality architecture and real estate marketing. So right there, Leon, I think that's a good jumping off question about kind of the early adopters in virtual reality from a business standpoint, whether it's in real estate or otherwise. But for some of these early adopters, there's the consumer apps. On the business side, perhaps, what are some of the areas that are important for the early adopters in using this technology to kind of forward their businesses, make money?
So I can speak to from a real estate perspective. So my business has been doing visualization for last 10 years. So we've seen a lot of growth in this industry. There's two parts to it. One is the design process. So it allows our clients to really immerse themselves into the design. So for example, A/B testing for architecture, being able to do real-time survey in VR. Do you like floor plan A versus floor plan B? And in addition to that, also providing data and analytics in VR. So for the sales and marketing process too, is we're seeing a lot more developers coming in saying, hey, you know what, we want to be the first guys to say that we're pushing this property through VR. One of our clients purchased 10,000 headsets. We created a mobile experience for them, and we also had a on-location experience at their sales center. So it's low-cost implementation. Allows the users visualize different floor plans in real time, change materials, furnishings in real time. So we're seeing a lot of changes here in our industry.
Great. Great. For Tyson Wos, that's you're in that business as well with Transported VR, a platform for real estate brokers to create and distribute virtual reality home walkthroughs to buyers. This is a very accessible place to think about virtual reality because all of us have had that experience of walking through a home, an apartment that we're thinking about living in. Your words, real estate will be VR's first killer app. So why will real estate be VR's first killer app, Tyson?
So just to clarify what I mean by killer app and what most people mean by killer app is the thing that you can do with the technology that you couldn't do before that's a great reason for consumers to adopt it, right? So I don't think if you look at the cost of VR right now, it's cheap and accessible, right? You can get a gear for $1,000. It's cheaper than a big TV. So the reason that VR isn't a big thing right now, I believe, is because there's not a lot of good reasons to have VR. So by saying that real estate will be the first app, I believe that real estate buying a home is so much profoundly better when done using VR as a tool. It will be one of those really compelling reasons for people to buy a headset. It'll be one of the things that nudge people to get onto the platform. I think gaming's a killer app, but it's not a killer app for most people. In the same way that real estate is not a killer app for most people, but when you're buying real estate, it's a pain in the butt. So things like watching movies, watching documentaries, that sort of content, I honestly just don't believe that's a really compelling reason that's going to get people to buy VR. So when I say killer app, that's what I mean.
Great. Let's Udi Dayan from he was in Vancouver, CEO of Navigate Surgical. I love this. Love anything around healthcare for all the reasons in terms of improving quality of life. Basically developing motion tracking 3D visualization tools, driving improvements in surgical procedures. So this seems like a significant potential leap forward in the way we think about medicine, medical applications. So maybe just talk about what's hype, what's reality in terms of virtual reality for medical in medical applications, surgical applications, Udi.
Well, there's a great change in the way that medicine is delivered today. In the 16 years that I'm in the business, I've seen a change from freehand, unguided, unmonitored, with no real reference to the clinical data activity, to more patient-specific, accurate delivery of care. And that is done through several methodologies, and one of it is the imaging that creates the virtual world that we want to operate in. And then we need to marry that virtual environment into the reality that we are, creating that blurry line between VR and AR, which doesn't really matter. What really matters is what the customer experience that we want to deliver. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that that the patients get better care, more accurate care, what they need, rather than having more invasive procedures. A lot of that technology of virtual reality and augmented reality allows for minimally invasive procedures. That saves patient comfort and healing time on one hand, but also systematically allows to deliver better care to more patients. So the whole operating room now in various hospitals, you see more technology coming into it, and the trick is, and this is where we specifically come in, is to embed it into everything that they're doing rather than to add gadgetry and machinery, etc. Right?
Great. Well, let's come back to Jared Sandrew, president of GoGhost, and Via has done a lot of work in entertainment and gaming, and working right now on Pirates of the Caribbean 5. My 9 and 10-year-old sons are going to be excited to see that. Going to want me to, I'm sure, spend the extra dollars for the 3D experience for that, Jared. But let's talk about gaming entertainment. Right now, PlayStation, Sony came out with the 40 million potential PlayStation VR headsets. This is obviously the area that there's just this entertainment gaming area that feels like there's been the most immediate impact. Maybe just talk about VR, 3D, where the line is. How are we all going to be going to the movies with our Oculus headsets on? Are we even going to go to the movies? What are some of the kind of the latest thinking in Hollywood about where some of this technology will impact the entertainment and gaming businesses?
Sure. So if you look at a VR headset, head-mounted display, they're all stereoscopic devices. One image gets delivered to the left eye, one image gets delivered to the right eye, and then we fuse that information ourselves. And so, and since we're creating content and trying to tell stories with these devices, it's using a lot of the same tools and skills of the entertainment and visual effects industry. So you're actually seeing a lot of jobs come back from overseas where they were getting tax rebates in Canada or in the UK, and we're being able to utilize a whole bunch of talents that are here in the US, which is good for my industry. But yeah, I mean, with the PlayStation VR coming out, it basically there's not 40 million potential headsets. There's 40 million PlayStation 4s sold to date, and so that's 40 million potential headsets, and that's not including the amount of PlayStations that have been sold since January of this year. So there's going to be a lot of early there has been a bunch of early adopters that have gotten the Oculus and the Gear VR and the Vive, which I have all of them, but general public that already has a PlayStation 4 in their house is going to be able to buy one of these headsets and immediately consume content. So there's a big race right now to generate content so you can be sort of first to market, and the people that buy these headsets are going to buy all of it. Or a lot of it, at least, because it's the first stuff that's there. So we really generally want this content to be good, so that they continue to buy it. The PlayStation VR, the Oculus, the Vive, they all they deliver gaming content, but they also deliver entertainment and sort of canned experiences in the form of 360 video, and that's typically what is sort of like the low-hanging fruit for Hollywood, because we're able to sort of set up a camera somewhere and capture a moment and then add visual effects on top of that. Yeah, I mean, do you want to know more about?
Yeah, we'll come back. If you don't mind, Joe, I want to throw a question out of the group, because I want to come back to this this image here and Facebook. And Facebook is, my last count that they have over 1,000 people working on virtual reality, and it kind of that skunk works with Oculus. They're very secretive about it, and this idea of virtual reality. Their first foray into hardware. Let me start with Julie. I mean, you run a 3,000 plus person Facebook group dedicated to women in virtual reality. Why is Facebook? What is it with Facebook and that social media, that social application in virtual reality? Why do you think why do you think they're making such a big bet here? And what is some of the chatter on Facebook in your group about kind of some of the social aspects of it and connecting it with some of these social media platforms, whether it be Facebook or Snapchat or others?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two sides to it. One, people want to share content in the most immersive ways that they can. And so I think that, and Mark Zuckerberg has made a lot of reference to this too publicly, where he said, that when Facebook first came out, the number one thing people shared was text. You just updated your status. And then it was photos, and now it's video. And then kind of the flip side of that is that Facebook makes money from advertising, and you can make much higher margins on advertising with like engaged video. And so I think that's why they're making a big push for live video. And so I think the vision there is that ultimately with VR, you'll be able to share. It's even more immersive. You know, you can share. First, we'll probably go into 360 video, and then ultimately, you know, scans of environments or things like that. And so I think that's kind of where their head is at in terms of being able to share more immersively. But then on top of that, if you interact with someone in VR, even though right now we don't really have the capabilities to see somebody in VR, like if you go into Oculus, for example, and you both have a CV1 on, you can see the other person, but they're just a head and like hands. They're just a generic head and generic hands. But it still gives you a much deeper sense of who that person is, just because you can see them kind of moving and interacting. So the first time that I met someone in VR, I met them afterwards in person. And it was like the most surreal experience, because I felt like, even though I hadn't seen them, I felt like I had already met them, because I'd heard their voice and seen the way that they, like their essence. And so I think that's only going to get more realistic over time.
I'm going to throw Jared comments there in terms of that. That's that idea of kind of text to photo to video to VR. Certainly in the entertainment arena. Any comments you'd like to add on to that?
From the evolution of this? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just the kind of the experience. The gamers tend to be out on the leading edge of this. In terms of
yeah, I mean the gamers are definitely the ones that are going to be buying the headsets first. In terms of an interactive experience, you know, Julie probably knows more about this than I do, but there are going to be more advanced avatars that are going to come out, and so rather than just seeing a silhouette of a head and some hands, you'll be able to, you know, map your face onto your avatar and be able. We'll see a lot more people engaging in that, but I don't really know.
Yeah, no, of course. It's one of the lines in the evolution with the social aspects here with VR, and why in your view Facebook is putting billions of dollars here, making this big bet here.
And I think in the beginning, kind of did it just because it was cool, which sounds like a kind of a trite thing to say, but it's just one of kind of Facebook, Google. It's kind of how they're making big bets, is if something comes along that's cool. But I mean, Facebook's been pretty explicit in the last year that sort of, you know, between AI, connectivity, and VR, like those are the three main pillars of their 10-year roadmap. And I think the reason they're doing it is, again, going back to the idea of a killer app, like, you know, our VR lab here, we have every single VR experience that everyone's putting out, and I probably had like 200 to 300 different people through our lab here. And the things that, interestingly, one of the things that people just find incredibly, there's some things that aren't compelling in VR, they sound compelling in theory but aren't, and some things that sound funny but turn out to be incredibly compelling, and one of those things is interacting with other people. So Julie was mentioning one of the ways that sort of Oculus is doing it with just heads and hands, and Google's experimenting with a lot of those things. But it's really hard to describe. It's just one of those things that until you try it, you don't get it. But VR just conveys a sense of physical presence with another person, with a location, with whatever, in a way that like photos and video just don't do. So you don't, and like you just don't have that self-awareness until you try it in VR, that being in another room with a person, there is like another mode of communication that happens there that's not video, it's not just visual, it's not just audio like we're doing sort of in this webinar right now. There's just this third dimension of communication that happens when you're in a space with somebody, and it sounds kind of strange to talk about like that, and until you feel it, you don't get it. And I guess you can test it out by just being in the same room with somebody. But the special thing about VR is it replicates that experience, right? Like that, the sort of like all of those subtle movements and communications that happen when you're physically in a place with somebody, VR is like pretty good at replicating and synthesizing some of those things. So it just takes it's social is just one of those compelling things that turns out to just be really awesome about being in the same room as somebody.
Leon,
add on that. So actually, I tried this really cool experience at SIGGRAPH a few weeks ago. So it was by NVIDIA and Dassault Systems. So they created a nice, a large-scale community plan, urban planning model, and there's 4 vibes, and everybody can put it on, and you guys see everybody interacting with each other. So each person was a different, had a different role. So one was the architect, one's the urban planner, one's the developer, one's the interior designer, and we were able to collaborate in that same model, being able to highlight certain things, being able to say, hey, or you make this changes, that changes, and change things in real time, which is something that you can't really do in real life if your designers in China and your architects in Europe. This is a way to kind of collaborate in this environment. So this is something that really only VR can really accomplish.
let me throw this question out to, and I think probably to Udi, because I think about kind of medical and doctors and resistance to change. And the first time I wore the Oculus, it was an incredible experience. Also, as an older guy, it was something. There was a certain strapping that on my head. I'm like, man, I don't think I could. I mean, yeah, this is an experience. I'm just not going to incorporate this into my life. I'm just thinking of that crusty old surgeon and using some of these tools. Any comments on that in terms of just the adoption?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, that was a very accurate description, I should say, because there is great resistance to change in general. But I have to say that relates to exactly what the thread that is through everybody else's, the rest of the panelists' comments, is that at the end of the day, people think that we make decisions logically, but the work that being done by Professor Kahneman and Dan Ariely, etc., show that we are basically an emotional being, and VR, being immersed in it, actually gives you a really emotional connection to the environment that you're in, and a different level of interaction with, if it's people, to that level. But to address that resistance, it's there. And traditionally, medical devices trail technological and scientific advancement by anything between 3 to 17 years on average. Sometimes it takes more, and that's from the technology side. I'm not talking about pharma right now. Virtual reality, along with, if you want the change in the demographic that goes into this, you can really drive change by introducing tools, first of all, for the proficiency, to increase the proficiency level in the simulation universe, where clinicians get to know the clinical situation better and are allowed to make mistakes or learn from the mistakes without harming anybody in the process. Because at the end of the day, you harmed a software algorithm, nobody really got hurt. So this is the real way to affect that change. So the old guy that doesn't want to strap on anything on their head, that's fine, but that's not how you're going to drive the change. You're going to drive the change through changing introducing it to the younger generation that are not afraid to experiment with this, and through the experience that you want to deliver them, which at the end of the day ends with the patient. That's what we need to incorporate into what we're doing to deliver them the care that they want to deliver. So it's a weird balance and a dance. Please.
I was going to just jump in. We've actually had that experience a lot, right? People looking to buy a home, all of a sudden you ask them to put this goofy thing on their head and they don't want to do it. And we've taken a slightly different tack on it in that, like, that's our challenge, right? Like, it is a weird thing to have to mess up your hair to put on a headset. Like, it is a weird thing to have to put on some other sweaty person takes it off their face and now you want me to put it on your face. Like, yes, you look goofy with it on, and I don't want to be in a room of people looking at me with this thing on. Like, all of those social things and perceived hygienic things, like, those are actually real challenges. And so the way we've always looked at that challenge is, one, we mitigate it. So when we have people in VR, we put them in a room by themselves. We give them a little face condom. It's not really like that, but it's sort of like a little thing that goes in between them. So we mitigate these things as much as possible. But then we look at it as a challenge, like our business. Can we give you so much value with this VR experience that you're willing to put up with some stuff? And if the answer is no, then we haven't. Then it's no, right? So Totally, those are totally real challenges that Udi's seeing, and Jay, you brought up that you've experienced yourself. But I don't know, the way we don't sort of write it off as being a curmudgeon or being like an older thing. We look at it as like real human things, and like if we can't mitigate those and bring enough benefit to kind of get over them, then VR is not going to be a thing. Like, it's not, mobile phones are awesome because they're easy to type on, they fit in your pocket, and they last all day, and they're easy to use. They're not like because you're forcing yourself to use them to use Instagram.
There's a couple of questions that came in that I want to just incorporate in the discussion. Maybe for Jared, because you have done work in the gaming arena and coming back to that gaming, edutainment, education, utilizing technology, and thinking about virtual reality in an education context. Do you see that as an area that young people perhaps don't have these inhibitions, and where some of the possibilities are there?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, with VR, we can actually simulate pretty much anything, right? So in a gaming environment, did I lose you guys? Or you
we can hear you, Jared. You're good.
In a gaming environment, you can simulate anything, and you can create real-world physics. And the gaming engines are getting better and better with real-world lighting, and so you can feel a lot more immersed and have less of an uncanny valley when it comes to seeing actual people if you're training to do some sort of medical procedure, or if you're learning how to weld underwater, or some of these things that are more dangerous. All of those applications with a little bit of money can be developed, saving you money and actually saving lives.
I just want to...
Not to mention one other thing is, this is sort of a time machine, right? So currently we're going around the world and we're using these 360 cameras and LiDAR, and we're building out all of these things that exist today, and we're saving them in perpetuity. So in the future, the younger generations are going to be able to go to these places virtually, and that's really interesting to me as well.
I want to stay on this topic because I do think it's something that for the mainstream user, the form factor and the headset, and that a question has come up here about the space with wearables, augmented reality, the gateways. Maybe Leon, you have a design background.
Yeah.
Just the design of the unit itself, as it becomes it evolves, and we think about Fitbit and the iWatch and just those elements that make some of these technologies more accessible. Just comments on that in terms of the form factor and design, and where you see that potentially going and how that would impact.
Are you mentioning the design of the headset itself, or?
Yeah, I mean just the design and just the kind of the look and feel and the impact there, and those aspects and how they impact the experience, and how as the design improves, how that can open this up to a wider audience.
Yeah, so right now, I would say personally, I think the HTC Vive has the most immersive experience. But one of the downside is that it is tethered to a computer. So if we could get away from that, I think that could be a huge bonus. Of course, like motion tracking, all that stuff, that's really where we want to head towards. So for my comment here is just the computers got to get more powerful. The headset's got to be more immersive. At the end of the day, I personally feel like the unit's got to get a little bit lighter and less bulky, in my opinion. Personally, I like the Google Tech, which I'm not sure you guys are familiar with. It's not really a headset, but it's really just it's kind of like you're putting glasses on top of the mobile phone. I think that is something that is heading to the right direction, in my opinion. But maybe you guys can, the rest of the panel can comment on this.
Yeah, go ahead, guys.
Sorry, I was said it comes down to what is the experience that we want to give, that we want to provide. If it's an immersive, I went to SIGGRAPH and I went to one of those presentations that you were talking about, and I found myself, even though I was physically on Everest Base Camp once, I climbed higher using that virtual reality experience, and it's a completely different experience because then you add the dimension of of the audio just by having that. So it's a question of what's the experience that we want to provide, and that is the driver, I believe, to what the design needs to be. Because sometimes the goggles are going to be just fine. Sometimes the cardboard is just going to be just fine. Sometimes just adding the audio is going to be just fine. And sometimes you need to build an entire room that you can't really tell where is up in order to be immersed in it. It depends on what is the application that it's serving for me.
Yeah, I just want to add on that. So there was a really big conference in China just recently, last 2 weeks, called China Joy. So in my opinion, I think they're actually leading in terms of the VR movement, specifically in the hardware side. They're creating room-scale VR experiences, full like VR arcades, full-purpose VR amusement parks. So I think that's quite interesting, Udi, what you mentioned there. It really depends on the experience.
If we could, so we just don't get too inside baseball. Maybe Julie, room-scale virtual reality. Is everybody wearing a headset in that dynamic? I know you've done a few of these comments there. What that actually means? Explain that to the audience.
Yeah. So room scale just means that you can actually walk around an environment. So in a lot of the headsets right now, particularly the mobile ones, like with the phone, you can look around, but you can't actually like move around or interact. And so that's just what room scale means. I think in terms of the question, I think that the main reason you can make wireless wireless room scale headsets already. I think that the reason that the big manufacturers aren't doing it is because it's difficult to do wireless HDMI, and it's also really expensive. I think that's the only reason why we haven't done it yet, but it is definitely possible to do it with untethered.
We have to kind of remember though too that getting an HTC Vive and having that much room is kind of a luxury for a lot of people too. So it's not, and that sort of like leads to what Leon was saying about China is, people are not necessarily only going to be experiencing this stuff in their home. They're going to seek out bigger, better experiences with more power behind the experience and curated for an event or to be complementary to a feature film that's coming out in the movie theater lobby or whatever. So it's not just going to be people at home consuming this and buying content for $3, $4, $15. They're going to be going to the theaters. They're going to be paying an extra $4 to be in the World of Warcraft or to be underwater with Dory before the film or after the film, based on the schedule of the headsets and how many they provide.
I believe, to build on that, if I may,
Yes.
I believe that one thing that we need to take into account when you're saying that they don't always have that ability, and that's why in China I believe it's moving forward in a different pace, is because the demands on our time. It would be great if all of us could have been in one room, right? But demands on our time does not allow us to travel to those places.
Right.
And as working people that don't necessarily have the time to go and take a vacation, to go to a center that would be maybe 6 blocks away, put on those glasses, and all of a sudden you're in the rainforest in Borneo, that's that type of escapism from reality that we all need every now and then, that building towards it as we go and huddle more in cities is going to be more of a requirement, as travel may not... Sorry?
That's a phenomenal point, Udi. I mean, I had a friend of mine who just spent 2 weeks in Spain, and he asked me if when was the last time I took a 2-week vacation? I'm like, I don't want to answer that question. And so maybe I'd love to get some feedback there. That's something that I think is very relatable. Travel and some of the immersive experiences to go places that, the reality, because of time and expense, the vast majority of people would never be able to do, and how virtual reality can make that possible.
I can tell you personally that there were many concerts as a music lover that I really, really wanted to go to. I just couldn't drive down to Seattle for a whole evening and take the 2-hour border. I mean, if anybody crossed the Vancouver-Seattle border, know that every now and then it happens, and get there and do. If I can just go and have that here, that experience here, I'm going to do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to ask you one more. I'm going to throw out a question here, and then I want to we have a lot of questions in the audience. I'm going to try to unmute some folks so they can ask the folks these. We have a couple of real estate questions I'd like for Leon and Tyson to take. So we have some questions. I'm going to try to unmute the audience, and hopefully that it's going to work, that they can speak here. So maybe I guess the question is, if you were to kind of look at this on an international perspective, that what is the you mentioned China. Usually, you see Japan, Korea as early adopters. I mean, anything culturally we have some that you think is where some cultures or countries are going to adopt this faster, and some countries and locales to watch in terms of VR adoption?
Yeah, I mean, if I may, I mean, if you relate this to 3D and stereoscopic filmmaking, domestically, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, well, 3D's dead," or the 3D market didn't really take off. But if you look at the numbers, actually, last year we hit a global box office record of $38 billion, and 7.8 billion of that came from 3D ticket sales.
Wow.
And 90%, and I may be slightly off by this, but 90% of Chinese, Russian, and Japanese moviegoers would rather go see, well, if given the option, they would rather go see a 3D film versus a 2D film. And so people are looking for more immersive experiences all the time, and the theater chains and studios are also looking to see how they can make more money on the IP that they're already generating.
You think so? Culturally, you think some cultures are more kind of open to that immersive?
Sure,
side of that.
I think domestically we're a little jaded to new technologies, and so we don't get as excited about it right now. We're just a little bit more jaded. So when we all talk about it in the U.S., it sounds like it's not going to be a thing, and then it actually ends up being much bigger than we ever imagined. There's films that have teetered on whether or not they were going to make it a 3D release, and then when they did make it a 3D release, they looked back at it and said, "Oh, if we didn't make it a 3D release, we would have lost money, but because we did make it a 3D release, we made 40 million extra dollars in China."
Great. Any other cultural comments there, guys, in terms of adoption that you see? Go ahead, Udi.
Sorry, go ahead.
Julie, after. Go ahead, Udi, and then let Julie go.
I see that, you see that especially I saw it very, very clearly in Japan and China, where both for different reasons, where that interpersonal space and that respect to the other prevents from experiencing, having the ability to learn the way that we take for granted. We can have a conversation here. Almost anybody can have any conversation with anybody. And all right, it may sound off color, but we didn't really offend anybody. And in those cultures, sometimes you don't have that freedom, just because and which is great, right? But that's how they do it. So they need that outlet through which to either experience or learn new experiences without the risk of embarrassing themselves or other. That's what I've seen in my field. And they're not allowed to touch patients, for example, until they have mastered some skills. And that gives them that ability.
Julie, you'd like to add something there?
Yeah, I think so. So I don't have any I don't have quantitative data on this, but just kind of what my feeling is that China, Taiwan, and Japan are all they already consume a lot more. It seems like they're more comfortable with CGI-based animation. There's a company, I forget the name of it, but in Taiwan they do all the news and everything, and they actually do it in CG. So they model out political characters in CG and stuff like that. And I think in general, it's possible that a lot of Asian countries might be more comfortable with the uncanny valley. It seems like there's a lot more photorealistic looking robots there that people that people are comfortable with. So I think in terms of early VR content, a lot of it is very much kind of uncanny valley territory, and I think that they're more likely to adopt that.
Great.
And then just to add from a innovation perspective as well, China has less rules and regulations on creating hardware for VR. whereas in the U.S. There's more. So that's a bit of a disadvantage, I would say, but that's just something to note there.
Well, great. I'm gonna. We promised 45 minutes, so I'm gonna do now is that as folks on the attendees need to drop. If I can hold our panelists for another 10 or 15 minutes, we have a lot of questions from the audience. I'd like to unmute some folks and let them ask you these questions directly, if that's okay. And then we'll look to wrap right at 10 o'clock Pacific. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me see if I can unmute Sam. Sam here. Mr. Jansen, are you? Can you hear us?
Hiya. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. Yeah, over here. It's nearly time for me to go home from the office. But,
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm Sam from FreeFly VR. We're a London-based virtual reality headset design company, manufacturing company. Yeah, I was just wondering, because obviously all of us are really into our virtual reality, and I'm always feeling like we're all a bit closed off, maybe, and I feel like we're all maybe even a bit incestuous. We all just talk to each other, and we're selling to the early adopters who already like VR. I was just wondering, what do you think the general public think about virtual reality, and what do they want from it? What do they expect from it? You know.
I'll start. I don't think they want anything from it. I think that's up to us to tell them, like, why do you want to have this goofy thing hanging off your face? And right, like I think that's the job of us. Like, that's the job of us, playing around, tinkering, trying to come up with like really, really interesting reasons for people to have that. And I think that's one of the really exciting things about what we're doing right now is it's not clear what it's good for. Like, I think it's good for games. It's good for It's good for entertainment, for sitting back and enjoying yourself. But the really interesting things that's going to happen over the next 5 years as we figure out the answer to exactly that problem. What do people want from it? Because I think everyone right now, it's just FOMO. Like, everyone's heard there's something happening. They don't really get it. They just know that it's something big that they should want something from, but they don't want to know what it is. So it's kind of up to us to figure that out.
People see it and they want to try it, and if we don't create content that is at par with at least the best games that they've played or the coolest films they've seen, they will, domestically at least, be jaded by it and probably not be interested in it. So it's really up to us, the guys that are all talking together, to make sure that we're coming out with something that of quality, and not just trying to make a quick buck being first to market.
And I also think, like, the majority of people have not actually tried VR yet. They heard about it, they've heard friends like it, but they've not actually tried it. So I feel like it's like, if you try it, you know, chances are you fall in love with it.
And for me, there's two things. One, those of us who've been here long enough have seen the rise and fall of the early VR attempts 20 years ago, which were bulky and to be honest, from an experience perception, horrendous. But also, there's and that jaded a lot of the, I would say, your main consumers that are not the spenders that are not the younger generation that have seen those changes. But more than that. For me, I see two paths. One is, yes, we're a bit incestuous and we're discussing amongst ourselves the technology side of it. But as Tyson said at one point, that it would emerge that the application, I'm not talking about an app, I'm talking about the application, what is actually used, that would be widely adopted, that would change the public's view on it, that would take it out of our geek realm into the mass world. So it's two different tracks: the technology development, which has to happen. If we don't do it, nobody else will. And then there's the market side, which will eventually happen as we progress.
Great. I want to thank Sam from first of all for being on the line from London, and his business Firefly VR is doing some really cool stuff. So appreciate you being with us very much, Sam. I know you have a lot to add on this topic. I want to see if I can unmute. I think this is a great, really interesting question here. If I'll read it. If we, Barbara, are you with us? The question about filmmaking and for kids, and if you're on the line, I'd love to have you ask that question to the group. I think it's a great question, great comment question.
Thanks. I'm interested in this immersive emotional versus just seeing stories, particularly in building curriculum for values-based skills for teens and children, like empathy, resilience, cross-cultural understanding, the idea that they can experience something that's outside their own experience, and it can help them build understanding in a way that nothing else seems to be able to do it. So I'm a filmmaker, and in that context, this seems like it has the potential for the reach. And so I'm wondering, what advice do you have for those of us that want to create content for specific audiences, particularly an education and youth audience?
Just do it. I would say just go ahead and do it. You're not going to nail it the first time anyway. Really, you're not going to nail it the first time anyways. And we know from an educational perspective, there isn't an absolute 100% correct. The fact that you're exposing them in an immersive way to something else, you're already so far ahead of the curve that I would want to be your student. Real.
A lot of the work that we do is sort of like empathy based, like you were saying, and it works. You know, like I mean, putting somebody on scene in a situation makes you understand something in a whole new way, and it's only going to get more immersive as the years go on. But yeah, I would say just like you can rent a 360 camera for pretty cheap, and learn how to stitch it together, or hire someone to stitch it for also pretty cheap. So I'd say just make it.
So that's the question: is this technology going to become affordable for the sort of independent content makers to?
So we're equipping our agents right now, $350. You get a Gear 360 camera. It's about the size of your fist, about the size of a baseball. It does all the stitching, everything. It's as easy to use as it is shooting video on your phone. Now, the editing of it, the storytelling of it, the setting up the scene, that's up to you. But actually just filming it, it's now about $350 to buy the camera. So game on. Like,
all right.
Do it.
All right. We're going to go there.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm gonna going from empathy to making money. Let's go right to Ilya here. If we can unmute Ilya. Ilya, are you with us? I think you had a great question about VCs and about the mindsets of the investor. Ilya, if you're unmuted, if you could ask that question to the group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just basically it seems that tremendous amount of money being thrown at VR at this point in time. We kind of seen a similar attempt to finance the 3D industry, post-avatar industry. Now VR seems to be the next wave, and the investments of $2 billion by Facebook and Oculus Rift and Magic Leap getting $600 million investment. Neither one of them still have a commercial product really out in the market. I'm just kind of curious of the mindset of an investor when they're funding a VR focused company. What are they really looking at? Are they looking at potential, 40 million users of VR headsets, as was discussed here, or what's the mindset of an investor when they see a VR-focused company, which is really an emerging market that really have not produced any financial returns at this point?
Yeah. Well, so with Facebook investing all of that money, a lot of us have been looking at it saying, okay, so now you're investing all this money in this hardware that you need to get everybody to go out and buy, or you need to give away for free so that they consume all the content. But we need to generate content, and that content, it can't just be 360 video over the next year. Like that, and 360 video, what I mean is something that you can record standing in one spot or moving, but all you can do is sort of look around and experience it. The content creation is going to be in the form of games, apps, augmented reality, and immersive content like that. And so, as an investor, I would be looking at technologies that allow you to consume this content and allow this content to be better than the average bear, because it just seems like there's a lot of content out there that is kind of just the same stuff over and over again. And if you can find something that's unique, whether it be videogrammetry, which is the capturing of the real world in a gaming type environment. 3D audio, I think, is going to be a huge thing where you actually are immersed by more than one sense. So just going out there and looking at different technologies. I am a little worried about people investing in content and having it flop. So I would be more looking at technologies that are basically complementary to the VR head-mounted displays.
But what really makes this different from the stereo 3D experience we went through? Because basically every TV manufacturer in the world started to produce 3D TVs, so the distribution channel was much broader. And then you had 3D channels pop up, and then that none of it worked because the content was not sufficient to have a full-time entertainment channel. And then at the end of it, people were saying, well, I don't want to wear the glasses. But now we're migrating from a stereo glasses that are pretty much would look very elegant compared to the swim mask that you have to put on to see VR. Why would we feel that the lessons of the stereo 3D that did not work would go away and VR would replace it in some ways?
The market, when you're looking at stereo, at going from 2D to 3D and trying to sell that to the entire masses, we're actually coming in kind of through the back door by hitting up the gaming market first, and that's going to spread even more. And then as Udi and Leon and Tyson are getting into different markets in terms of architecture and medical fields and education, there are women that can't go to school in some countries because of travel or because they're not allowed to go to school, and they could actually attend classes through wearing a virtual reality headset. And so there's content being created to
Awesome.
to do that as well. So there's more applications than just like selling movie tickets or buying a movie in a different format on your TV.
All right, well, this is great. We're approaching the top of the hour, so I want to wrap. I want to give all of our panelists a final word. So a final word. So let's say we're sitting here a year from today, August 11th, 2017. Okay, put on your futurist hat. A year from today, give us who's going to be a big VR winner a year from today. Tyson.
I am. No, I think not much will be different, right? Just like next year there'll be better iPhones out. Next year there's going to be slightly better headsets out. And unless we come up with, I think there'll be a few really interesting ideas, kind of like Uber and Instacart were for the phone, where people go, oh my God, that's what this thing in my pocket is really good for. What I'm hoping for is that a year from now there'll be a couple more of those, like, oh my God, that's what these headsets are good for. That's what's really exciting to me. Yeah, the hardware will be better. Yeah, we'll have a couple more. We'll have a Transformers movie or something in VR. But what I'm super excited about is those, holy shit, that's what this headset is really transformative for that we weren't thinking about. That's what I'm looking for.
Awesome. Leon, year from today.
So I think I have my money on Next VR. I think
right.
Being able to sit in the courtside NBA finals, fully immersive with someone next to you, potentially in a social environment. I think that's the future.
Amazing. I know. They just raised $80 million. They announced $80 million this week. It's so cool for us sports fans here. Jared,
I see a lot of the gaming companies, PlayStation, Oculus, and Vive are going to be doing well with their various portals. I think a lot of the 360 video stuff, if it's not used for education, is going to fall off. But I also think that the AR market is probably going to take off faster than we all expected with the success of Pokemon Go. And I know people say that's not AR, but a lot of people are looking at it and saying, we can make this better. We can continue along this path and you know, one thing that they need to understand is that Pokemon had was a great piece of IP, and so you need to make sure that if you're going to go that big, that you get some big piece of IP to attach it to. But AR, I think, is going to come on faster than we had all expected, as everyone and their mom tries to keep up with the success of that.
Udi, winners? Year from today.
Well, first of all, Tice, I hate you. You stole my answer. But yes, and I also agree with you, Jared. I think that AR, as more applicable to more people faster, would make I think a faster run at it. More people are going to be more used to it, and in the medical field, I hope it's us. I hope. I'm working on it.
Hey, Julie, I know you just attended a big conference here on VR here in LA. Final word, winners.
Yeah, I think kind of like everyone was saying, I think that in a year from now, just because that's so close, I think that a lot of the winners in immersive technology in general will be in mobile AR. I think Snapchat's really great. I think there'll be more things like Pokemon Go. But in terms of strictly VR, I think that Fove is going to be a winner. Fove is they're a Japanese headset, and they do eye tracking, which allows you to do like foveated rendering, which solves a lot of problems in the industry. I think that like if we can really figure out how to do that, which I think they will, it's gonna be golden.
Well, great. Listen, I want to thank most importantly thank our panelists and Leon, Jared, Udi, Julie, and Tyson for their time and their enthusiasm and really sharing their wisdoms from their careers in virtual reality and the innovations that they're doing. I will just close by saying that, you know, those that aren't in this business, and I know that there's a lot of folks on the call that aren't, take the energy of, you know, when you have a business that is doubling every other year, that has some of the smartest, most innovative, most entrepreneurial folks in the world looking at it and trying to figure it out. Just there's a great energy, and you know, for those that are in businesses that are perhaps slower growth, you know, find those areas in your business, in your industry, where there is that type of innovation and energy, and that's usually where the opportunity is. So we'll make sure everybody gets a recording of the webinar. Also, if anybody, I'm happy to pass along any notes or request for connections to any of our fine panelists. So simply, there'll be a survey when you jump off this webinar. If you'd like to connect with any of the panelists, I'll forward that note to them. And thanks, guys. This is great. I think next year, we're going to do it again. We're all going to have the headsets on. How's that sound? Do it?
Good.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jake.
Really, I appreciate it very much. Thanks, everybody. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for everybody for their participation and attendance today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.